Absolutely. Carol, do you want to start off?
No, oh, good. I was saying, I knew you were going to make me start. Okay. Hi, my name's Carol Glenn. I'm the first black female licensed official in motorsport, and I'm also the CEO and founder of Next Racing Generation. You can find us on our website at www.nrgmotorsport.co.uk, and I've got an Insta account which I think is Carol Glenn 1, and I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. I've been involved in the sport for over 30 years now. I started off as a marshal, and I'm now a clerk of the course for race. My sport for women has been, I think, has had quite a bad press, not just for for having women and also having people of colour, because although, as I said earlier, I was the first person, there's not very many of us that are in there as officials, much less as drivers. And as we all know, Lewis is the most high-profile black racing driver in England, well, in the world. And there are a few others, but they still number under a dozen on you can count them on one hand, basically, or two hands, of being racing drivers. And none of them have really got as far as Lewis has. So for me, it is all about not just breaking the glass ceiling, but also trying to improve that vision of motorsport by having more women participating and also more people of colour participating as well. So that's what I'm very much about.
Okay, well, that's amazing. I know, I don't know much about motor racing, so I'm really excited to chat to you and find out more about it. So to introduce myself, I'm Natalie Morris. I'm a journalist and author. I'm also the co-host of the Netball Show podcast, and I'm the former editor of England Netball magazine. And I'm a keen netball player myself. I play at the regional level in London and South East, and we take it very seriously and we love it a lot. And I've been playing netball since I can remember, since for 20 odd years. And I'm a huge advocate for promoting the sport generally, because it's a women-only sport, and we don't have like a male version of the sport to piggyback off of like a lot of like other female sports do. So we've had to kind of work quite hard to build our profile over the years and to build that respect almost, because there is a lot of kind of stigma and like looking down and misunderstanding around netball. People think it's a kind of a schoolgirl game, that isn't taken very seriously. So I've been doing a lot of work, and a lot of people in the media and in the same spaces as me have been working hard to kind of reframe how netball's perceived, and to just boost the profile and to get it out there. Because we're really good at netball in this country. We're one of the best in the world. We won gold at the Commonwealth Games, and we shouldn't be having to fight for coverage and fight to get people to care about this, because it's one of the few sports we're actually very good at and consistently win medals in. So it's just trying to get that message out there. So I guess I'll start off with asking you, Carol, what got you into motorsports in the first place?
Well, I'd always had an interest in cars right from I was about age 11. I remember watching things like the early Grand Prix that used to be held at Brands Hatch. I remember watching the RAC rally, and I particularly used to like rally cars at that stage because it seemed like they were just flying through the woods. And I remember saying, oh, when I get older, I'm going to have an Audi Quattro, because I just loved watching the Audi. I just remember a white Audi Quattro flying through the woods. I mean, I'm still waiting for my Audi Quattro, so hopefully one day I'll get it. And then it wasn't until I got much late, and basically I come from a family of 4 girls. My dad was a builder, my mum was a housewife, so there was nobody. We had no brothers or boys or anybody like that got me into it. And then I then met somebody who I was living with, and then they used to disappear off at weekends, and I sort of said, where are you going? They said Brands Hatch, and off I went with them to watch as a spectator, and I fell in love. So I remember sitting at Brands Hatch, outside on the corner of Post 5 at Druids, and watching all these cars coming careering towards me, and couldn't believe how close and near I was to watching racing cars. And it was just absolutely, awesome. So within weeks or months, I then had my first membership to one of the clubs, had my first set of orange overalls, and I was then a becoming marshal. So rather than being on the other side of the fencing, I was now in front of the fencing. And,
Yeah.
and if those cars went off, I then helped push them out the way, set the gravel, learnt to do flags, you know, did all the roles that one had to. And I just found it so exciting and exhilarating. Yes, I've loved it. And I can't believe 30 odd years has gone where I've basically been a volunteer for 30 years, because that's what you are, you're a volunteer official.
Yeah.
And it's taken up most of my weekends. I mean, my
Yeah.
family, if you talk to my family, they'll tell you that I've missed, you know, so many different family occasions, you know, from birthdays and christenings and weddings, because it'd be like, oh no, I can't come this weekend because I've got racing. Because
Yeah.
because you're volunteer as well, it's a commitment. So unless you're ill, you don't really want to not be there, because you know if you're not there, that the sport can't go ahead. And that's the same
Yeah.
whether it's a Grand Prix or just national racing. Without the marshalling force and all the team that's there, this sport cannot. And it's one of the main, only sports I know that relies upon volunteers to be there. Very, very few people are actually paid to be in the sport. And racing drivers, they pay to enter a race, so they expect to have the safety aspects on the ground. So yes, that's how I got into it. But saying that, I'm interested in yours, because when I was at school, I wasn't very good at sports, but the one thing I did love doing was playing netball. So I did used to play in
Oh, really?
my school, especially my senior days, in my senior
Yeah.
girls netball team. So yes, I did used to have a go at netball.
Amazing. See, this is the thing about netball. Everybody's played it. All women have
Yeah,
played it at some point in their
yeah,
lives. So everyone's got that frame of reference.
yeah,
But there's definite similarities there. What you're saying about it being completely volunteer led. Netball is a very similar picture. You go to the games, the Super League, even the internationals, all the officials, the umpires, everybody involved, they're volunteers. They're not being paid to do that. And as you say, they're so vital in their contributions than what they give up to keep the sport running, just for the passion of it, just because they love it. To get little back from it, other than the satisfaction of doing it and having that responsibility, it's huge. And is another big reason why it's so important for us to push for more funding, for more sponsorship, to get that kind of money and awareness pumped into it, so that it can continue to grow. Because I think when it is volunteer led, there's almost a cap on how far it can expand, because there's only so much you can ask of people without paying them. So that's always been something I've thought about, and it sounds like there's a definite similarity there. I wanted to ask you, just pick up on something you said there about drivers paying to enter, and I've heard about this before. I've actually I wrote an article about getting more young Black kids into motorsport, off the back of Lewis Hamilton's success. And I spoke to a parent, and he was saying just how exclusive it can be, and how much money you have to have in order to get into it. That they're buying like these cars for their kids, essentially, so that they can, which was astounding to me. I didn't realize that was how it worked. And so what is your thought on that? Like, it must make it very difficult. Like, it's not an accessible sport in that sense, is it?
No, it's not accessible for a number of reasons, and it's not just about money. It's about actual where people live and access. Because if you live in inner city London, or let's say Hackney, or anywhere like East London, somewhere like that, it's like you say to a young kid, "Where's your nearest race circuit?" They're not going to have a clue. They're not going to know that literally, actually, about an hour's drive down the M20 or the A20 is Brands Hatch. They don't know that Silverstone. They may have heard of Silverstone, but they don't know that it's actually Northamptonshire. And it's not exactly on a public transport. So it's not. So that's why it doesn't always become the first thing that they think about. They'll think about going to playing football, because you can go down to a field or a park and kick around the football. You can go to a football club. You can go to a football match, because most football grounds are a bus ride or a train ride away, especially in London. So it's not for me. It's not about money, and that sort of accessible is part of it, but it's actually getting people out there and actually saying that yes, you can be part of that. that's the same like me. When I was an 11-year-old girl, I didn't know that you could get involved in motorsport as an official. That I just what I saw on TV, that you had to be a racing driver. So it's not understanding the whole structure about motorsport. So that's why, again, with NRG, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make the access easier for parents, because there are still a lot of parents out there who have got the money. So you've got different groups of people. So you've got people who've got the money, but they haven't got a clue where to go and start. And if they do get in, then a lot of people keep things to themselves. It's not a sport that you share a lot of knowledge. You don't. So often parents get led up a garden path, and then by the time they've realised that they spent a lot of money, they've actually gone to the wrong thing, or they're not in the right championship, or all of that. So for me, it's all about getting rid of all those myths and making sure we've got the children in the right space. So there are quite a lot of parents from diverse backgrounds, who have got their kids in karting, for example. So karting is one of the cheapest. Well, it is the cheapest, and it can be the most expensive sport. So parents might buy their child a second-hand kart for birthday, Christmas. They may find where the kart track is. They'll join a club. They'll do the whatever many rounds there are. But then their child is not getting anywhere, because what they may not realise is that they need to make sure they've got a little bit of mechanical skill to know how to do set up the car. Because if you don't set the car up properly, then your child's not going to be competitive. You may not know what brakes you should put on, what tyres you should have, what ratios you should have there's all those sort of things. So then you end up having to pay somebody to run your child. And again, that's when the costs can go up more and more. And if your child is good, then obviously you want to have maybe a more powerful kart, and then it goes on like that. And also, a lot of parents don't realise is that by the time the child gets to 14, if they are any good, you don't have to keep them in karting. You can actually get them into racing, because you can actually get your race licence at age 14. You can actually have a race licence before you're road legal driving the road. And there's a lot
that's quite mad, isn't it? Imagine a 14-year-old in one of those powerful cars. That's quite scary.
Well, we'll say that they're powerful, but not powerful, because they have to do what's called a junior championship. So you've got like junior saloon championship. So they're only actually driving in like a Fiesta, or the most powerful car is a junior Ginetta car. And the junior Ginetta is actually part of the touring car package. But again, saying that, when you get to that level, if you're going to try and go racing at that level, you are looking at 100,000 for the year.
Wow. Surely that closes so many doors immediately.
It does.
That's an enormous amount of money for your child.
And then that's where you've got to try and get sponsorship, and get someone to help to sponsor, and that's how it goes.
There must be a massive drop off then. There must be people who get into it, and then there's a point where the costs just kind of spiral and they can't continue, and then you're losing talent. There'll be people who could be amazing, but because of these barriers, they're not getting the chance.
And that's what NRG wants to do, because I'm hoping that through NRG, rather than and I spoke to quite a number of parents about this is why I formed it, and I said, well, rather than you going out on your own and trying to go, you go to Joe Blogsbank or whoever and say, sponsor my son, he's brilliant, and they're going to go, well, who's your son and what can he do for our company? And you can't relate the two. I can go to a company and say, sponsor kids that are racing, that are coming, want to get into racing, and then I can list out all the things that I can do for the company, because it'd be better as an entity, I'm an entity. I can meet all their sustainability needs, their diversity needs, all of those. So I'm hoping I can attract the money, the sponsorship, and then from that way I can use it to not just to run one child. I can use it to run 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children. Because my plan is I would want to see throughout all different formulas, going up to and including Formula One, more and more children of black and brown out in racing.
So that sounds like an amazing kind of approach to it. It's funny because I think in netball we don't really have the same kind of problem. Like, there isn't that accessibility thing. It's similar to football in that everyone plays it at school.
Yes.
You don't need any special equipment. You don't have to pay high fees to be part of it. You don't have to buy yourself a boat or a bike or any of these kind of things that often, you know, create these divides within sports. So I think that's really good. And as a result, I think we do, on the face of it, have a lot of diversity in netball. Like, you look at the demographic of the people who are playing at all levels, from grassroots up to, you know, the elite teams. You look at our current England Roses team, and it's incredibly diverse. There's loads of fantastic Black players who are doing incredibly well for the country and for their Super League teams as well, which is great to see. And you know, you see how much that impacts on the kids coming through on the grassroots level. They look up to these players and they see that there is a space for them in netball, that this is a welcoming space where they can thrive, they can do incredibly well, and there aren't these barriers that are going to prevent them from doing that. If they want to do it, they can go ahead and do that. You don't have to be from any kind of background. You know, even the girls, they're diverse in terms of their race, but also, you know, socioeconomically as well. These aren't kind of, you know, elite people from a very certain background who all went to the same university. This is a very open space. There, you know, there's people from all ends of the country. There's Northerners, like, and these things all feed into the kind of inclusivity of the sport, and how well that plays out through, and how it trickles down throughout the entire system of people playing netball at every level, which I think is brilliant and something we do really, really well. But also is a natural consequence of the fact that netball is immediately more accessible, which is a good bonus for us. But then I think where we need to work, what we need to work on, is allowing Black players, particularly at a grassroots level, to have more agency and to have more of a voice about their experiences. Because, you know, like any institution in this country, there will be issues of inequality, there will be experiences of racism happening, whether that's through you know, player to player, whether that's through an experience with a coach or an official or parents on the sidelines. These things are still happening. Netball is not perfect, and it doesn't exist outside of the mechanisms of racism that, you know, pervade every element of society. So that is happening. And I think what we have to do in netball as a whole is have a lot more space to talk about that, to tackle it head on, and give space for players to feel more comfortable in reporting these incidences. Because I think for a long time there's been a tendency to kind of stick our head in the sand, and I think it comes through from a place of not wanting to shine any kind of negative light onto a sport that is trying to grow, onto a female sport. We don't want to, you know, cast anything negative in that space, or talk about it. But as a result, it's the Black and brown players who are being impacted by this, and who are being affected. So and I think since 2020 and the Black Lives Matter movement in the UK, there's been a lot more vocal kind of pledges and promises, and there has been action, which has been good to see. It hasn't just been, you know, a tokenistic post a black square on Instagram and leave it at that. There has been action in terms of addressing equality at board level, which has been great. But I wonder for you whether it's in motorsport there's a similar kind of movement since what happened in 2020, whether there has been positive steps, and, you know, and with Lewis Hamilton being so vocal in that area as well, what kind of impact has that had on the sport as a whole, do you think?
It's been rather uncomfortable for a lot of people. I mean, when Lewis started speaking out in 2020, that's when I got brave and decided to speak out, because I thought, well, actually, Lewis, you're not the only one. There's me at the bottom. So he very much knows I'm around, and I do, you know, I'm in touch with his people. When he formed the Hamilton Commission, I was very much part of that, and I was part of their report. And so what's happened now is that I am now almost like the go-to person. So it's also not just Lewis now. It's people realize actually there is me as well, and so they're a bit more interested. You've got, in 2020, I had a lot of people get in touch with me via LinkedIn. A lot of people saying, "Oh, they love the initiative, love what I'm doing." you know, want to know more, blah, 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 and that's fine. And a few people I have been talking to, and I am working in collaboration with one of the major teams as well at the moment. But what I do find is on the subject of diversity itself, it's still a little bit not quite sure what this means. And it's hard because when their landscape is purely one color, one dimension, they don't see it as an issue. But what they don't realize is, you know, when you've got me and maybe one other person, and we're the only ones, and when they're having their conversations and they forget themselves, and Sally makes it, and then they go, oh no, we don't mean you, you're okay, it's all the others. You get those sort of comments.
Wow.
And then you get overlooked, because I mean, like, for example, I've had my clerk's license for 5 years now, just over 5 years now, and there's been clerks that have come along with a year's experience who've been given prime jobs, prime positions, and then when I question that, I get told, oh well, you know, it's none of your business, it's, you know, these other people have got more ability, because all those people are men. So the old boys network still exists.
Yeah,
they get pushed up all the time. And then if you start, then you have to play this game of when do you push and when you don't, because then what ends up happening is I end up coming over as an angry black female. And so I've got to try and not do that, and not do it's not fair, because it isn't fair. But you've got to play in a different way. And it would be so easy for me to walk away. And I think a lot of people say to me, well, why are you still doing it? Because fundamentally, I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy the life I'm around. I enjoy the things I've done. I mean, excuse me, I don't do as much now, but I have travelled with, you know, abroad. I used to go to, I marshaled at Le Mans. I used to go to Nürburgring. I've been to Spa. I've been to Monaco. You know, so there's a lot of things that I've done, and there's a lot more things I still want to do. So that's why I formed Next Generation. It's exactly for that, to try and you know, be in people's faces, make them more aware. And then what I've noticed is a few years ago, let's say, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago, women in motorsport was like the pariah. That's the one nobody wanted to talk about, women in motorsport. Now you'll find that people will talk about, they're promoting, there are a few more women in motorsport, which is good, but there's still not a lot of women of colour in motorsport. So you've got maybe more female racing drivers, more officials and things like that. But you still look down, you know, pit lane on a Grand Prix weekend, and how many women of colour do you see? You don't see them. You've got what's my train of thought then on that? So and then also things like disability in motorsport, that's got a better platform. LGBTQ platform. So who's the one that's at the bottom of the list out of all those three? Because those other three are easy wins for people. But then to tackle diversity, it's diversity and racism, and then that then means they've got to look at themselves, and who wants to look at themselves. So when you've got you know, when you think, especially within motorsport, and I don't think it's the same so much in netball, but a lot of the clubs and officials and people who sit on the governing bodies are old, white, grey, aging, 60 plus white men. How can they relate to a 12-year-old, 13-year-old young black youth who like shrug their shoulders, and because they've got a hoodie on, they'll be seen as being gangster. You know, you've got all of that. That's all the stereotypes. When people start to say, "Oh, we're not racist," you know, no, and then they forget that they may have forgotten the times when they may have made a racist remark, but don't realize it's a racist remark, because banter, which is in the sport, which is prolific in the sport, you know, when you see me walking into race control, or see me walking around and suddenly you start trying to talk in a Caribbean or an African accent. I don't speak with a Caribbean accent. I can't do a Caribbean accent. But I think that's quite normal to come up and say, you know, make comments like, "Oh, you know, be careful, Carol's around. She might pinch your tires off your car." You're trying to make out that I'm a gangster or a thief.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what I've had to put up with. You know, and the people come and ask questions like, "Why is your one side of your hand white? And do you bleed? Is your blood?" Yes, I've had all of those.
Wow, I am shocked at that. I mean, sadly, I'm kind of not at the same time, but it's awful that you've had to put up with that and just doing something you love. Like you say, you're a volunteer, you're giving up your time to help the sport, and this is kind of the
Yeah,
treatment that you're met with.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah. But
that's
the thing is, you
outrageous.
see, yeah, and the thing is that it's, and these are the same people say, oh, I'm not racist, and they don't realize all these things. And of course, when I look back now, I never did anything about it because I was on my own. You
Mm.
don't want to make so you sort of laugh along with it. I mean, the other one that I used to get done was, I remember I used to get called Whoopee all the time. You know,
Yeah.
there's another colleague of mine that when we're around, people can't remember our names. They get the two of us muddled up, and it's like, you've
Mm.
only got to remember two of us. What you're trying to
Yeah.
say? We both look alike. I mean, I'm quite short. She's much taller than me. Different build,
Yeah.
different look, and they cannot remember our names. So now, if somebody calls you by the wrong name, I just don't bother answering, because it's like I have to
Yeah.
remember
Ooh.
hundreds of names, hundreds of
Yeah.
names. You can't remember my name, and often I'm wearing a club shirt, which has got my name on it anyway.
Well, that's just rude. And lazy of people. And it's just this constant stream of microaggressions, like an
Absolutely.
overt kind of racism like that. It really weighs on you. In an individual sense, these little things might not seem like that much of a big deal. And the person who said them might be like, oh, what you worried about? But when you compound them all together, like you say, you've been doing this for 30 years,
Yeah.
like how much are you supposed to be able to put up with and just shoulder
Yes.
and not say
Exactly.
anything? That's
Exactly.
the thing. And
Exactly.
then, and like you say, it's this catch 22 of not wanting to look angry, because the moment you speak out, you're then, you're told you've got a chip on your shoulder, you're told you're making everything about
Absolutely.
race.
Absolutely.
So and it's a classic, silencing technique. It's a way to just shut you
Yeah.
down and make it
Yeah.
impossible to
Yeah.
respond. It's
Absolutely.
so frustrating. It's really frustrating to hear you say these stories.
Because ever since I've started talking out of the last 2 years, then I mean, I go to race meetings, especially between March and October. I'm at a racetrack somewhere, and not many people have come up to me and say, "Oh, I've seen your article. Can you tell me more about all the things, experiences?" Most people just go, they just blank me, because they
Mm,
can't believe I'm talking about it. And for some people, I was seen as being, like I say, almost aggressive and being,
yeah,
critical. But I'm just speaking the truth. I'm speaking about
yeah,
what's happened to me.
yeah,
Experiences I have had. And you can't take that away. And I'm sure Lewis,
yeah,
he's been quite good. I'm not actually saying. I'm sure one day when he writes his memoirs, he will shock us all with the things that he's had to put up with, and I will not be
yeah,
surprised, because I'm sure he's had exactly the same thing. And he
yeah,
gets it anyway with the fact that even now he's the great. He is the greatest. He's won 7 world championships, and they cannot say he's the greatest. They'll talk about Schumacher. They'll talk about
mm,
Senna. They'll talk about
mm,
everybody else. But to have his name, because basically at the end of the day, he's a black man and he's a global
mm,
entity, and that grates in a lot of people's throats. They cannot,
yeah,
they cannot, they cannot actually say it. So
yeah,
they'll mention it, and it's very passive. Oh yeah, he's okay, but the greatest is
yeah.
Senna, but the greatest is Schumacher, but but he's broken all their records now.
It's ridiculous. How are they even still having this as a conversation? It's clear, like the facts are there, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't matter, because it stares them in the face, um, that they still don't want to believe it.
Yeah,
So no,
yeah,
so it's good. I wanted to ask you one question, because you've done all the questions to me, but going back about netball is,
yeah,
so why hasn't netball, because I mean, what I do love, I don't follow it religiously, but I mean, I watch a little bit of women's football, and obviously got women's
yeah.
cricket. So why
Hmm.
is it not had the same kudos as those yet? Do you think, netball?
Well, I mean, we're getting there, and I think the growth over the last 5 to 10 years has been phenomenal, in terms of the fact that we're now being shown on Sky Sports regularly. In terms of the growth in the crowds that we're getting out of the stadiums at the Super League and at international level, in terms of the sponsorships that we have, with big companies, like Vitality, with Nike,
Yeah,
all of these kind of partnerships. It's been a slow growth, but it has been steady.
steady.
Um, but I think it's related to what I said earlier about us being a female only sport and the
Yeah,
inherent kind of barriers that come with that. We don't have a full stadium of fans
yeah,
that have come to see the men that we can then
yeah,
put the women's on
yeah,
before. and give them that kind of benefit. Or, you know, a lot of the women's teams now in cricket and in football and in rugby are now building these kind of equality clauses into their sponsorship. So
Yes.
any
Yes.
ones that sponsor the men have to give a certain percentage to the women, or
Right.
have to do the same for the
Right.
same kind of promo. So we don't have that. And it's, you know, it's difficult for us to kind of draw people in to actually give us that level of funding that would really take us to the next level when we don't have a men's team. All you have to do is look at the comments on Twitter whenever BBC Sports or Sky Sports post anything about netball. There's just a string of abuse from men
Right.
saying that it's, you know, who cares, this isn't news, like, you know, it's a silly little game for girls, like, just, and this kind of vehement, like, visceral reaction that some men in sport have whenever netball tries to take up any space on those bigger platforms. So it's been really difficult to try and kind of elbow our way into
Right.
that space. But I do think we are getting there. And you know, the results speak for themselves. Like, we keep winning things, and I think
Right.
that once we I don't really know how much more we need to do in order to
Yeah.
prove.
So so why are men not into netball, but they could be into basketball, which is not dissimilar?
Well, because of misogyny, because of sexism, because men don't play it. So that, you know, there's a men's basketball team, they see that as a men's game. Therefore, you know, in some men's eyes, that makes it legitimate. That makes it worth their time. Whereas as a women's game, it's immediately
Yeah,
just
with you. Yeah,
disparaged.
no, I understand that. Yeah, no, I understand. I
That's
understand.
that's essentially, and that's what we're up against, you know, when we're trying to
Yeah,
grow. This kind of deep-seated misogyny that kind of undercuts any progress that we make. It's always there. It's always trying to pull us back and not let us get to that next level. So that is,
yeah,
I think that is the biggest barrier that we're facing, and all women's sport are facing, but it's particularly apparent in a sport that is female only, that doesn't have a men's team. You
yeah.
can really
No,
see it.
no.
Um,
Well, I really hope it does change, and I think you just need to work on trying to make it be seen as it's not just a female sport, and maybe, you
yeah.
know, something that needs to be done within schools and going through schools, and maybe encouraging schools to form boys groups as
Yeah,
well, teams.
that is happening. That is happening, and you know, there are more and more men's teams and mixed teams that are becoming more and more prominent, which is, I think, a really good thing for the sport. And that kind of inclusivity that I spoke about, it's not just about race; it's also about gender, and there have been big campaigns to kind of get men on side, both in terms of playing, but also spectating, and just showing that it is such an incredible spectator sport, regardless of the gender of the athletes on the court. Like, that shouldn't matter. So, you know, getting to that point, there's been a lot of work put into that over the last 10 years, and I think it is starting to cut through. So hopefully that's something we'll continue to see over the next 10 years.
Okay,
So yeah, so fingers crossed massively.
that'd be
But
good.
I guess I'll ask you a final question before we wrap up. So what are you looking forward to in your sport as a Black person in 2022?
Wow. So hopefully seeing the landscape change a bit more. I mean, my plan is this year that I'm going to be bringing a lot more youngsters, a range of youngsters, lots of groups of youngsters and adults to come down to. I'm inviting them down to various race meetings where I'm going to be this year,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can come and say and have a go, not to have a go, just they can come and see what racing is all about. You know,
Yeah,
not saying you've got to actually become involved in it, but just to say this is another thing you can do as a family to come out for a day out. You know, it
yeah,
can be enjoyable. And then for myself personally, hopefully I can try and progress up the ladder a little bit
yeah,
more. I really would like to try and get to international level. And just hope that, you know, I can see, you know, more people of color, more females as well, you know, out there doing something in motorsport, whether it be a driver, an engineer, or
yeah,
whatever. So that's
yeah.
what I like. And I suppose the same question back to you.
Um, well, yeah, for me, I mean, 2022 is a big netball year. We've got the Commonwealth Games in
Of course,
Birmingham
yes.
this summer. So that's our Olympics, you know, like netball isn't an Olympic sport. So the Commonwealth Games is our Olympics. And we're defending champions. We hold the gold medal from, 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago because of COVID, however long it was ago,
Yes, yes,
um,
yes,
in Australia. So we're defending champions. We're on a home ground. This is
yeah,
absolutely huge for the fans, for the entire
yeah,
netball community, for the athletes, for the English Roses to be, to be playing in front of a home crowd and defending that championship. That's going to be absolutely enormous. And I implore
yeah,
anybody to get involved with the Commonwealth Games, to get tickets, to get your teammates to come down and support, because it's going to be incredible. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm hoping that we can take the gold again. I'm hoping we can embarrass the Australians once again, because
yes,
that's my favorite thing in the world.
yes,
Um, and but then on a personal level, I'm just hoping that we in netball can continue the positive trajectory that we've seen in terms of increasing inclusivity, continuing to have these important conversations since they started with the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. I don't want that momentum to die down.
yeah,
I want us to
no,
continue to push, to continue to take up space and force these conversations and ask the questions, ask the uncomfortable questions.
yes.
And then on an individual level, in terms of my playing, we've got a really big game this weekend. We're trying to go to playoffs. We're trying to go to national prem playoffs with my team. So on a personal level, I hope we get to playoffs. That's what I'm trying to do.
I wish you all the luck. I'm sure you'll
Thank
get
you.
there. I know
Thank you.
it's been lovely chatting to you, and it's nice to actually understand a little bit more about a game that I used to play as a child, and I've
Yeah.
got interested. So that's really
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. Thanks so much, Carol. I've loved chatting to you as well.
Love chatting to you too. That's been lovely. Thank you.